So today we're finishing a message series called A Better Way, where we're looking at a better way of living. And today we're focusing on looking at a better way in a world that divides. And as we do this, I want to share with you about a time in Jesus' life when he showed us what it meant to live in a better way in a world that was divided. John tells us a story about a time when Jesus was traveling north from Judea, which is kind of the area around Jerusalem, from Judea into Galilee, which was an area in the north. Now, the shortest route from Jerusalem and Judea to the north, to Galilee, went through a region called Samaria. What you have to know about this in kind of the early times is that Jesus and his friends mostly were Jews. And the people that lived in Samaria, with the land that was between Galilee and Jerusalem, these people were not Jews, they were Samaritans. And here's the deal, there was a great deal of division and animosity between the Jews and the Samaritans. Some scholars would argue that Jews would not even travel through Samaria. Instead, they would take the long way around. We're not going to drive through this place. It's like, if you're going on a highway, we know the cops are going to be watching the roads. We're going to go around. And that's what many scholars say the Jews would do, is that they would go east through the Jordan River, go over the Jordan River or through it, and go up around to get north. And that was a long way around, perhaps the polite way to make it to the north, a much longer trip, but it was done because there was so much animosity and division with the Samaritans. I share this because in what John tells us and what I'm just about to read is that Jesus doesn't take this long route. Jesus doesn't take the polite route. Instead, Jesus has to get to where he's going, evidently a little quicker than politeness would allow. And so he has to travel through Samaria to get here. This was about a 35-mile trip through rocky and hilly terrain. Nothing is easy about this trip. And when Jesus gets to this town called Sychar, he is tired. And remember, there's this deep division between Jews, Jesus was a Jew, and the Samaritans who lived in this town. And these groups of people, they hated each other and they didn't trust each other. They believed that each group had their own values, their own different values, and that the other group was rotten. Okay? They didn't like each other. Division breaks people apart. And John, the one telling the story here, tells the reader, tells you that even if you had forgotten, there is a great divide between the Jews and the Samaritans. A different translation of the Bible says that Jews in those days wouldn't be caught dead talking to Samaritans. Now, in some communities, perhaps, Republicans wouldn't be caught dead talking to Democrats, and there's other communities where Democrats might not be caught dead talking to Republicans. This is the division that is present these days. These divides are so deep. The divide between the Jews and the Samaritans was not just about policy, it was about their core values. But what does Jesus do? Jesus doesn't focus on the division. He is thirsty and is like, I just need some water. He just asked for a drink. But the woman is confused because she knows that they're not supposed to be talking to each other. She knows that they're supposed to stay apart from each other. She knows that they aren't supposed to be together. And then Jesus is about to offer her something that is greater than the division that they carry. I mean, I think she's still skeptical here. She knows the divides are deep, and this is just some guy that's trying to mess it up. He can't be thinking, this man can't be thinking that he is better, he is more important than me and my family and my ancestors. I have a heritage that is deep, and this man, he's an outsider, and he can't be telling me something that's better than what we already have. But Jesus replies that he's not there about the divisions that break apart. Instead, he replies that he is there, Jesus is there, offering something greater than division. He is offering a different way of living, God's way of living. And when she hears this, she starts to get excited. At this point, the woman is beginning to recognize that there is something more than what keeps them apart. And then she and Jesus have this conversation about her living situation. And as they have this conversation about her living situation and her family, she begins to realize that this isn't just a man, that he must be a prophet. He must be a special person of God. And so she takes this as a chance to ask him a question. She's like, you know what, I've got this prophet here. He knows a lot. And so I'm going to ask him a question that I think is a really good question. And I'm going to see what he has to say and see what his opinion is about this. And so she gives to Jesus and asks Jesus to answer one of the big questions that divides the Jews and the Samaritans. This is what she asked in verse 20. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you and your people say that it's necessary to worship in Jerusalem. So she's telling Jesus, she's like, my people have always believed that this is what is right and this is what we're supposed to do, but your people tell us we have to do it a different way. This is, to me, this is kind of like sharing some water with Jesus and asking him, who's right? Who's right? Which candidate is right? Is it the Republicans like I've always thought, or it's the Democrats that like they've always thought? Which group across the divide is correct? And to this, Jesus responds, you're asking the wrong question. I think this is kind of like him saying, there's a bit of truth on both sides of the divide. But even as there's a bit of truth on both sides of the divide, there's a better way altogether. The things that divide break, but God has a better way. And so regarding her question about worship, Jesus tells her that God has a better way, a way of worship that is full of spirit and that's full of truth. And if you keep reading the story here, that's exactly what happened. The woman gets a new vision about this community in Jesus and begins to tell other people about it. And many in the town set aside their divisions and everything that they had been doing and everything that divides them from other people. And they come together and create and enter into a new community in Jesus Christ. And today we call that new community the church. When Christians talk about the church, this is what we're actually talking about, this new community that is created and made possible through Jesus.